Kia ora koutou. Seems a bit strange for me after being a year in the UK, and slightly appropriate that I'm back on a screen presenting, which is as I said to Ellen when this happened, very disappointing for the summer after all the work that's been done, and would have been nice to meet everyone in person. But I'm quite familiar with this because I recently returned from the UK at the end of last year, so I said, I can do this. Having said that, I've now got to actually do it. So let's hope we get this right. So is that all good? Everyone can see that. So I'm presenting today in my former capacity, in my former role as Senior Director and Interim CEO of Living Streets in the UK. I was Interim CEO from 1st of April last year, which was quite an interesting time, and I spent 6 months running the organisation from my kitchen table. But there was an awful lot that happened on walking and about walking during that time, and that's what I'm going to share with you today. So for those people who haven't been introduced to Living Streets in the UK, or they're not familiar, Living Streets in the UK has been around for a very long time. They've been a beacon for walking since 1929. When you look at history, really, they started to come to being when motor cars really started to turn up on the streets. And back in 1929, there were no rules. You went out, you bought one, you got in one, and off you went down the street. You can imagine in a city like London, even back in 1929, that caused a lot of challenges. So UK Living Streets was set up. They were called the Pedestrians Association back then. And they were the early advocates for successes, including zebra crossing, 30 mile per hour speed limit, and initiating the UK Highway Code, which has been under consultation last year and looking to have some changes. They now have a staff of 60 to 100. We had 100 when COVID hit last year, but impact of COVID does mean that some of the programs everywhere has shrunk a little bit over there. They run campaigns, they respond to consultations, sit on all-party parliamentary groups. I sat on the all-party parliamentary group for women in transport. We were in advisory groups, partner with local government to deliver programs of work and on government priorities in the UK, and also a lot of receive funding from trusts and foundations and donations to deliver their core work and independent campaigns as well. And it was really important to have that independent funding come in as well, because of restrictions on how you might use your funding, so that they could actually have campaigns, lobbying activities where they needed them. They worked with older people in communities, and they support workplaces to encourage modal shift to walking and walking for health. In May every year, they run the National Walking Month, which I will mention that was a little bit different last year. And in June, they join with other partners to support the Global Action Plan Clean Air Day. So Global Action Plan is an organisation in the UK who I did previously work for, who run the Clean Air Day in June. So if you haven't heard of that, that's definitely happened recently. Tune into what was taking place there, and do follow it next year if it's of interest. But Living Streets UK's largest programme of work is on the walk to school, and as Ellen mentioned, there are lots of reasons for that. Now, in the UK, the school run, these are some of the issues and the concerns of why the school run is important in the UK. There is a huge problem with physical inactivity. Childhood obesity is very high, and there is also air quality issues and exposure of air quality, as well as what we know in terms of the congestion on the school run. So that is setting up the habits for life, but there's also some really big issues for public issues for government that government are tackling that are linked to the walk to school and how pupils get to school in the UK. And last year, this might not have made news over here potentially, because there was an awful lot happening in December in the UK as the second wave was hitting. But this is something that did happen. There was a landmark case around pollution levels around schools in inner South London. This young girl had died of severe asthma, and the coroner ruled that it was linked to the air pollution exposure and the fact that around that area they were regularly breaking air quality limits. So this is something that is hugely important in a lot of cities in the UK, and it does influence a lot of the work that is happening in and around the UK is the level of air quality exposure. Now, that is a slightly different environment air emissions case to climate change. These aren't the same things that are coming out, but they're coming out from the same places. So, you know, there is the vehicle issue around this. But there has been, since there's further work happening following that case ruling, but that was quite a big thing that happened last year. So what is Living Streets UK doing about it? Well, they have the WOW program, and those who haven't heard of the WOW program, it has been operating over 20 years in various forms. It's a year-round walk to school challenge. It operates in over 2,000 schools across the UK. It's a pupil-led scheme. Children self-report on how they get to school each day using an interactive whiteboard travel tracker called the WOW Travel Tracker. If they travel sustainably, and that is walk, cycle, or scoot, they once a week for a month, so it's getting that regular habit, then they get rewarded with a badge. Now you might ask, why isn't it just walk to school when it's Living Streets Walk to School? Well, we worked over there very closely with local authorities, and for them the most important thing is travelling sustainably and how we have that shift away from private motor vehicles and the priorities that they have. So the flexibility around that, and actually saying we're looking for these shifts for how families are taking their children to school. The badges are made from yogurt pot off-cut materials that were destined for landfill, and the designs that they feature are drawn by pupils from around the UK. There is this massive competition, 200,000 badges, these drawn entries would come in selected from schools and pile into Living Streets each year and get sorted by the badge team, and then we would have a selection up around the boardroom that different people would be coming in and voting on. So it was a lot of fun, and really fantastic seeing them come in from all parts of the UK. We would have winners from Cornwall, have winners from Scotland, Northern Ireland, right across, and all the different ages. There's usually 11 themed badges that the children collect across the school year. And here was a lovely thing that I spotted come through on LinkedIn. Very proud father whose son Kian has just won one of the badge competitions. So his badge will be designed into a badge. He will, all pupils will get to win this badge if they have walked sustainably to walk to school or cycled or scooted to school. And this year, quite aptly for this summit, the focus was, or the theme was, climate change. So he has done the penguin on the icebergs, and if you can't see that, it says, I drew penguins because climate change is melting the ice caps and walking will help stop it. So I thought that was a very clear message from Martin Quinn's son, and a very proud father. So you can see it has quite a reach running programs like that. In addition, there is also what we would call walk to school outreach, where alongside WOW, we would have people going into, coordinators going in and working closely with local authorities. So these are funded either through central funding from government funding, which the local authorities feed into, or by the authorities themselves. And the local coordinators work with approximately 40 schools a year, supporting them to facilitate changes around the school gates in ways that work for their community and their school setting. So it's very localised. It does have a really high, it's been going for a long time with funding. It's been looked at, and it has a very high benefit cost ratio of 10. So those people who are in the BCR area will know that that is a very good BCR. And we have lots of conversions from fewer car journeys, walking trips from the program. So that is why, with the measures that are there, why it continues to be funded. I'm just going to move on to the latter part of the presentation here, just to talk a little bit about what happened last year, and this is incredibly topical with where we're at in Wellington right now. In the UK in particular, and around the world, the COVID-19 exacerbated inequalities that exist. It's, you know, while everyone has experienced lockdown, not everyone experienced lockdown in the same way. Not everyone was in, you know, it was not only the impact of cramped, overcrowded housing, but people living in those conditions were most likely to be key workers at high risk of bringing COVID home, or key workers who couldn't work from home, so it was coming home. And very sadly, the statistics in the UK show that the BAME, Black and Asian minority ethnic groups, suffered the worst from the implications, with deaths being in the highest percentages there. And they were at great risk because of poverty, underlying health conditions, etc. So this was a really important part of the work that we were doing last year, was highlighting and really drew to the attention of the UK how inequalities has to underpin, and dealing with inequalities has to underpin work very strongly. So what did we do when that all happened? Well, we had to, when the schools closed, we were just about to send out about £250,000 worth of badges to schools for their autumn program across the whole of the UK. And we had to make a call to pause those badges. And they sat in a warehouse for almost 6 months before they were sent out. And we thought, well, what's happening? Well, actually, what was happening in the UK is the one thing that was still happening for everyone is you were allowed to go for a walk. So we did the Walking from Home series, and there were lockdown blog series. If you go to the UK site, you'll be able to see some of the voices that spoke there. And we have local people there. The person up in the top second from the right is Will Norman, who's the Walking and Cycling Commissioner of London, and other speakers that we had talking about their experience. And particularly the fact is that in England, we still had key workers, the children of key workers, going to school. So it was really important that we tackled having an opportunity for them. National Walking Month went ahead. We still did Try 20, come rain or shine, and we encouraged people to take walking breaks, to go out during that time. And actually, our Walking from Home had 3,700 tweets, and equating to a reach of 3.7 million people. So it really did have a lot of reach during that time, and we really showed the importance of walking. And that led on to the types of things that then happened across the UK. And if people have kept in touch with what's happened in the Northern Hemisphere, School Streets is a program that came about, and that's about shutting the school gates at the start and finish of the school day so that families can safely walk that last distance to school. This doesn't work for all schools. It does depend on the function of the road, but there's an awful lot of schools that this started to be able to go forward in when it hadn't before. And social distancing around schools was a really important part of this. Also, low traffic neighbourhoods really started to come forward so that people could have that space to walk, to exercise, and those changes came in place through government funding in those areas. And so what did this mean? Well, actually, investment in programs such as the Walk to School, infrastructure changes, did mean that we had that walking habit, and so many more families have been walking to school. The evidence is still all coming in, but it is equating to supporting those families to walk to school. There are also things like speed limits, and I see speed limits is coming in New Zealand, sort of being revised, and all of those put together do mean that there is a greater confidence with walking back to school. And that was what the program was called when the schools did return in September, October, as they reopened, having been closed since March. Walking back to school became the program that Living Streets UK was doing. I'm just going to finish off with a couple of slides, which the other thing that happened in the UK last year for Living Streets was they launched their new strategy, the 2020 to 2025 strategy. I was very much involved in the development of this and bringing it together, the consultation we had with members and with staff. And what was really important in the background on those consultations and the priorities that were coming through, no matter who we spoke to, whether it was members, whether it was staff, whether it was key partners in government or workplaces, there was really driven by the overarching public concerns of the health of the people and the health of the planet. And that being the air quality, being climate change, being people's well-being, mental health, and physical health were all key drivers. There was, of course, still, because it's Living Streets, the concerns around road safety, but also that tackling inequalities on the streets and tackling inequalities in the voice of advocacy. So how we give voice to the communities that don't have the voice around the decisions being made on the streets, and make sure that that is something over the next 5 years that Living Streets is really looking at how they do. And we launched a statement committing to tackle inequalities, particularly around challenges that were being questioned and asked about the charity sector by the BAME community around the Black Lives Matter movement that happened last year. We also then had, sorry, it was just the key, I meant to say, yes, so those key outcomes, we had 3 key outcomes. We channeled in choosing walking, all walks of life, so the inequalities, and better streets, which is still that infrastructure and the safety aspects that have always underpinned the work. And then finally, there were 3 key objectives: speaking up about the rights and the requirements for streets, so being vocal, being ambitious, stepping up, scaling up the work that they want to do for walking over there, and staying strong. And that's about being a sustainable organisation, both sustainable in terms of the planet and also sustainable in terms of funding, and making sure that Living Streets can deliver what it wants to. And that's it from me. Thank you.